Hmm. Hey, there he is.
There you are.
All right. See if you can get your camera lens down just a little. Yeah, there we go. That looks good.
I look like a wanted poster.
Yeah, we all do. Welcome to the new driver's license. Yeah.
Yeah, a nearsighted bank robber.
Two.
We're partners.
Yeah.
Kurt
Tom Bluewolf.
Magnus and Burt Lancaster robbed the Western Union.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tom Bluewolf, this is Robert Pittman, who you know of as Alan Pittman, and I'm calling you to talk a little bit about wisdom keeping because you've got the Earth Keepers group, and I wanted to hear a little bit about you and about the Earth Keepers and about native tradition and whatever comes to your mind as being salient for our time.
Well, in today's world, let me see, I can see you okay better with that piece. There you are.
Yeah.
Right now, what I'm getting ready to go back over to Germany on Monday.
Yeah.
And the tour I'm calling this one is the Tribal Revival.
Okay.
And the goal is to do what we can to alter the current narrative, because all of our people have found that those that are holding the microphone now are saying things that are just unacceptable.
Right.
So we want to go back to the old language, where the idea of every day when you woke up, you would realize that the world is perfect. There's just a lot of people having a bad conversation. Right?
Yeah.
So our goal, and we agree to this, so it's got to have intention and it's got to have character associated with it.
Right.
You can hear me okay, right?
Yep.
Good. So I'm going to say that we're going to raise the level of our personal poetry so that everything we say to each other is a reflection of what we hold dear in our hearts about what it means to be a human being, especially walking together at this precious time on the mother, because we realize millions and millions of people have come and gone, and hopefully millions more will come and go. But we are the ones that were chosen to be here at this time. And in some ways, we are a dream come true, because our ancestors dreamed about their descendants. And we come from a lineage that was somehow successful in avoiding the genocide that's been going on this planet for thousands of years. Our ancestors bobbed and weaved and ducked and dodged and did whatever they had to do to have babies, because we're testimonials to that successful lineage, because we're walking on the earth right now. So we think that's worth celebrating. And so we want to make this particular earth walk at this particular time when mother is suffering as easy on her as possible. And that is happening through the language, because the language is the fabric of our culture. Once upon a time, we were designed to be the mother's immune system. We were shepherds, we were stewards, we were caregivers, you know, all over the place. We were doing these things, no matter what we did. We could have been blacksmith and tinkers and cobblers and whatnot, but in our hearts, we were shepherds and stewards and caregivers, and we cared for the place, and we took care of nature, and we protected the water, and we protected the animals, and we conserved our strength for the next 7 generations. And so we lasted for thousands and thousands of years. And look what's happened to her just in the last 500 years. The last 50 years have been unimaginable. And so we say that now she's in the 4th stage of an autoimmune deficiency. She has all the symptoms. She's dehydrated. She has chills. She has fever, convulsions and seizures and eruptions, and she's suffering. And so how she gets up in the morning, I don't know, but she continues to give birth to life. We continue to walk through creation. So she's hanging on as best she can. But I'm thinking, just like old Geronimo said, one day she's going to shake like a dog and all the fleas are going to fly off. So we have to be the ones right now who are concerned about the children. You know, it wasn't that long ago. I was in Africa and I met this Maasai Sangoma, big old boy, the medicine person for his tribe. And he towered. I mean, he was like 6'5", big guy. And so he shakes my arm. You know, they don't shake hands over there. They shake your whole arm, you know. So he's shaking my arm and he's looking at me and he says something in his language. It sounded like, and so I asked my interpreter, I said, what did he just say? Interpreter said, he asked you how your children are.
Okay.
And I thought, what a beautiful question upon encounter, you know. And so then he followed that up by telling me that when I answered his question, I would be telling him everything he needed to know about me and the culture I come from, because that's how they gauge the world, is how the people treat the children. And so I'm just jealous of the Maasai people and the way they live and the philosophy they have and how they construct their universe around them based on the future generations so they can keep the dream alive of life on Earth. And I want to bring that to everybody, you know, in whatever way that I can, and in whatever modality, whatever level that people can receive this information at, to understand that once upon a time, it was the children, it was the water, it was the food that grew from the ground. And people realized that we actually owe our entire existence in some beautiful way to 6 inches of topsoil and the fact that it rains. And so I think that kind of humility, that kind of respect, that kind of dignity, that kind of compassion and forgiveness and mercy needs to be reinstated in every human. And these ideologies and these delusional perspectives on the way things are have to change. And we have to go back to the authentic heart of the human, you know, compassion and love and respect. And I mean, every great person that I've ever read about in history basically were teachers of love. I mean, even Jesus himself wasn't a Christian. He was a teacher of love. Muhammad, right, teacher of love. Buddha was a teacher of love. And they had their own poetry, but all the great people said that. And so I really, you know, I think that this is the time to alter the narrative and take it back into that kind of poetry. And so right now, the mission of Earth Keepers is to reawaken the heart to the ancient dream of the rhythms and migrations that were a way of life for all our people when we actually did walk lightly upon the earth. And we do that through the narrative, how we talk to each other, you know.
Right. Language is key.
Yeah. Yeah. That's where it kind of starts, you know. My grandfather used to say a good conversation could possibly be the highest form of meditation.
There's a lot to that.
Yeah.
Tom, tell me something about your background. Which tribes have you come from, and where do you see the transition from the past to the future? Because there's a lot of people interested in traditional wisdom, and there's a lot of readaptation and reconstruction and transmutation of tradition into modern times. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. Well, it's my grandfather used to say the only nation he wanted to belong to was the imagination, and so there was a time, and it's alive inside of our DNA, it's in our blood, but there was a time when, before names, before tribal names, before we were called Indians, before we were called Native Americans, before we were called indigenous people, we were simply the people.
Right.
And if you transcribe any, whether it's Dene, whether it's Lakota, whether it's Muskogee, I mean, it all comes back to the people, whether it's the Buffalo people, the peaceful people, the people who keep the fire, the people. It's always the people.
Yeah.
And so I really, and because once you start giving people names, they start delineating it, they start categorizing them, and the next thing you know, there's all these separations based on names of things. But if we go simply, we are part of an anthropological group called the family of man. We are all interrelated and interconnected. We take it a step further and say we're interconnected with life on this planet, that we and this planet are one thing. We don't walk through nature, we are nature. So if we take that into account, then all of those historical stories about once upon a time in a land far away, long, long ago, become now. I mean, in somebody's story, it's all happening right now. Our people say everything that has happened, is happening, or will happen is happening right now.
So it's happening.
The place it can happen,
Same time happening.
Exactly. And so the stories that we tell about the past are basically designated in order to create joy and compassion and all these characteristics, fearlessness and bravery and courage, and how to love somebody very deeply and how to be loved by somebody very deeply. So all the stories are kind of like fables and parables and these kinds of things to help people in this present moment, because this is the only moment that's real to us. If we're thinking about the future, we get anxiety. If we're thinking about the past, sometimes we get depressed, So we have to stay in this moment, in this present moment. And so all of the stories we tell are to make this moment richer and more intentional. And so, but the nation that I was born into was the Muskogee Nation. And so, but it's gone through so many changes over time. It's hard to identify it and to designate any kind of characteristic to it. When once upon a time, we were the woodland people. We were the people who cared for the forest. But so many things have changed, even since my birth, things have changed drastically. So basically right now, and I'm going to oversimplify an incredibly complex situation.
Right.
But three kinds of people. There's like the traditionals, the ones who adhere to the government, and then the ones who are just confused, and oppressed and victimized and eat at McDonald's and crank out meth and beat their wives and whatever, what I mean, and abandon their children. There's that faction. And they have their own mental illness associated with that, and that thriving, the confusion with what's been happening in the past and how it's changing the future. On the other hand, the traditional people are doing their best to keep ceremonies and rituals and rites of passage alive so that we can keep the sanctity associated with what it means to walk on the mother like this. And so, and it doesn't matter what tribe, what nation. I mean, I have noticed so many similarities in Africa and in South America. I'm sure you have too. And in Asia, when you're talking to people who are of the earth, wherever they are, the indigenous people of every location.
Right.
I mean, they could be brothers and sisters. I mean, they have the same kind of libations, the same kind of ceremonies with different tones, different songs, different but the same intention around honoring the mother and respect
Yes.
for each other and love and forgiveness everywhere I go. And so it's kind of a confirmation. And so that's, when I talk about my past, in the reality, I was, in some people's story, brought up on the wrong side of the tracks, as some people say, back in the day. And so, and there was a lot of, I tell people I was born in L.A., Lower Alabama. And so it back in those days, it was a challenge,
Yeah.
to say the least, and so I have that memory, but my dreams are quite different. For instance, here's the world that a lot of us live in right now. I knew somebody. My great grandfather was actually on the Trail of Tears. He was a toddler, but he was on the Trail of Tears. In my lifetime, I met someone on the Trail of Tears. So for me, it wasn't that long ago.
Right.
And so they had a story. They said when the grandmothers finally realized that they were going to have to pick up and walk to Oklahoma, one of their biggest concerns was what to do with the treasures. Well, when the Wasichu heard that story, they thought it was gold. They thought it was valuables like that,
Right. Right.
But when we said that, we were talking about our medicine songs. We
Okay.
were talking about the relationship that we had with nature, hundreds and hundreds of songs for the trees and the animals and the water and so forth. And so what are we going to do with them? We couldn't take them with us because they got new songs out there with new places. So we wanted to honor that process. So, thousands and thousands of years of learning these songs. And so they was going to put them in a trunk and bury them. And they said, no, these people will find them and they'll corrupt them like they have everything else. They'll exploit them in some way.
Mm.
So finally, after hours and hours of deliberation, this one grandmother said, she said, I just saw the vision. I know what we must do. And they said, what's that? She said, we have to place all of our most precious medicine in the sweetest dream that we can come up with, because the people who live in a nightmare won't have any access to them. And we won't have to keep guard because they'll be their own worst enemy and keep themselves away from the things that are precious. And if by chance one of these people from the nightmare stumbles into a sweet dream, they're welcome to our songs. And as long as they stay in that sweet dream. And so that's kind of what I have adopted these days as far as my protocol is to keep a sweet dream alive. Honor the honeybees,
Yeah.
protect the hummingbirds, grow as many herbs and flowers as we can, protect the forest, protect the water, and most of all, make a safe place for the babies. That seems to be, no matter what direction I point in, that seems to be what I see, everywhere on this planet. That seems to be the medicine,
Right.
for the illness that the mama's going through right now. What I like to tell people is that imagine this. Imagine you're in a room with a woman you love more than anybody in the world. I'm sure you've been there. You're in a room with the woman you love more than anybody in the world, and that woman is about to give birth. How do you behave? Maybe you walk a little softer. Maybe you talk a little softer. Maybe you even whisper. Maybe you try to be a benefit. Maybe you try to support her and help her in this birth.
Yeah.
Well, that mother is Mother Earth, and she's always giving birth. We are literally walking through creation. That's why we walk a little softer. That's why we talk a little softer, because life is coming into being all around us. I mean, she is creation in it pervasively. And so this is the inspiration, I would say, for the kind of walk where you are continuously giving care and compassion and love and forgiveness, because that's the medicine. You know, that's what keeps the dream alive. The destruction, the exploitation. If everybody sees trees as board feet of lumber, we're doomed. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? We
Yeah.
have to start seeing the trees again. You know what I mean? And that's oversimplification, but you know what I'm talking about. And so my goal is to in any way possible to have people understand the significance of how precious this seemingly serendipitous interaction is of the people on this planet, and how we got here and all that that entails, and how we need to keep this. Like the 7-generation theory is a simple one and easy to follow. If what you're doing can't last for 7 generations in a good way, then don't do it.
Right.
If it can, then it's okay to do it. And it's as simple as that. But people have, you know, that with truth, respect, and humility, all seem to have left town a long time ago.
Right.
And so I'm thinking, I started looking around for them, and I found them. They're living deep in the forest by a waterfall. And so if you want to find the truth now, you got to go deep into the forest by a waterfall. And so then truth hung out there for a long, long time, long time. It's been gone a long time. You can know that. And so, but one day truth was sitting out on a stump out in front of his little cabin, and here comes Beauty walking up the road. He about lost it, right? Dropped his knife, quit whittling, stood up. Here comes Beauty. But she didn't even look at him because he forgot, you know, he's got a beard down to his knees now. You know, he's all ragged and tattered from hanging out in the woods for a lifetime. But he was persistent. You know how truth can be persistent. And so he kept on courting her. And finally, she saw the truth and she fell in love with the truth. So she married the truth. And so now my elders tell me we no longer have to actually look for the truth. We look for beauty. And everywhere we can find beauty, there's the truth right there, like the shadow of beauty. And so I could look at you and say, don't you think that little baby is beautiful? And you might say, boy, ain't that the truth? That's kind of where we are right now.
That makes sense. So it's not so much about the ideas in our head, it's what we can perceive and receive and affirm.
It's the heart. See,
Yeah.
that's what we're trying to promote. The head will mess you up like a coyote. That's one of the things, you know, they gave us the coyote and they put him in the head so that we could have all these beautiful stories. But we weren't supposed to believe them. We were just supposed to be amused by them. They put the eagle in our hearts because it always tells the truth. It may not be what we want to hear. It may not be amusing, but you can take it to the bank, you know? And so the eagle and the coyote are always working back and forth, you know, your heart. My grandfather used to say the most torturous journey you'll ever make is only 12 inches going from your head to your heart, you know?
That's a distance.
Yeah, but that's the destination because that's where the humanity lives and that's where the future is. If it's not, then there is no future. Look what our head's done to us. You know what I mean? We're, like they say right now, we're circling the drain.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's circling us too, as long as we're fixed on it.
Mhm.
The one question I'd like to throw out is, in your growing up time, did you go through any initiation protocol?
Did I?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It was well, it was kind of different because my grandfather was the keeper of the medicine on this and this little community we lived in. So there were not a whole lot of little people. You know, I was one of the only ones at that point in time in this particular area. You know, and so my younger years was mostly around animals and gardens and, you know, food and taking care of that kind of thing. And so until I was about 8 years old, I really didn't have a name. They just called me a brat. because I kept letting the dogs loose. You know, they'd have all these hunting dogs locked up in these pens, and when I'd go out there, they'd be up on the, like they wanted to get out, you know, hanging on to the fences. And so I just opened the gate and take off they would. And so you could hear them off in the woods. You know, for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, it took them to gather them all back up and bring them all back into the pen. And I'd be down there one day and they'd all be like, let me out, let me out. And so I'd open the door again. And so my grandfather finally said, this was the first ritual rite of passage I remember, was my grandfather finally said, if we keep calling him a pest, he's going to keep being a pest. We need to change his name.
Okay.
To something beneficial. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so they started telling me I needed to dream, you know, and stop behaving in such a way and just start dreaming about sweet things and good things, you know, and that those things would come true, because we're actually a walking dream come true. You
Right.
know, you could say my great grandmother dreamed about me and all of a sudden I appeared, you know, through the belly of a mother.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's when they gave me my name. And I was about 7, 8. And then that was a significant moment.
Pull your camera just a little bit, Tom. Pull the camera down just a little.
This way?
Yeah. Yeah, because you lean forward. That way we can keep your face in. Anyway, so, yeah. So you were the pest.
Yeah, so that was the first one. And then another one when I was around puberty, you know, around 12, 13.
Yeah.
Because in the tradition that we were brought up in, that was your initiation into manhood or womanhood, whichever the case may be.
Yeah.
And then you get to figure that out until you're 50. And then when you're 50, you have the closing ceremony that you finally arrived at your manhood or womanhood. And then now you're supposed to know what your medicine is by now, you know, so that you can carry your medicine in a good way.
So what happened in your puberty time? What was your rite of protocol?
Well, it was kind of like when I was younger, it was almost like I felt like entitled. Like I had, like, you know, people say I know my rights. I know my rights. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
So I'm going all through the woods. I'm turning the dogs loose, you know, and I'm exercising my spiritual, physical muscles, saying, I'm going to turn it loose. I'm going to turn it loose. I'm doing. So by the time you're 12 and you're supposed to be entering into adulthood,
Yeah.
you give up that idea of entitlement or rights, and you start realizing that you have obligations and responsibilities.
Right.
And so that's introduced to you, says, now, you don't just get to do all these goofy things. You got to think about the people. You got to think about all the people, the four-legged people, the winged people, the swimming people, the plant people, the standing people. That's where you stop focusing on yourself as an entity. You start focusing on, you know, the larger picture of who you are. Then you say, well, and so it's kind of like that African word, Ubuntu, where you say, I am because we are. You know, I wouldn't, my life shifted then. And it was almost like this huge thing just opened up where if I look in the mirror, I just see me. But if I look into the world, I see me everywhere. It's like I am you being me. You know what I mean? And I can say that to the trees, I can say it to the rocks, I can say it to the water.
Well, did they take you through a ritual to feel that, or did it just come upon you?
Well, it was a ceremony that was instilled with the intention of having me initiate myself into that way of thinking. Well, now I didn't just like jump in the water. I kind of tiptoed. You know what I mean? I kind of get what you're saying. You know what I mean? But I got to tell you, the older I get, the smarter my grandfather becomes. You know, so it's a never-ending thing. I'll tell you, for instance, when he passed away and he said he was going to give me the best gift of all his grandkids, right? So I'm thinking it's going to be a tractor, maybe a mule, maybe the mule. And mule was awesome, mule. Well, when the time came for him to tell me, he told me that what he was going to leave me as a gift was, he said, when you're so hot, you think you can't stand it anymore, I'm going to be an appreciation for a cool breeze. When you're so thirsty, you think you so parched, you can't go, I'm going to be the next cool drink of water you drink, and you're going to appreciate it. I'm leaving you a great appreciation for a cool breeze and a good drink of water. And I looked at him and I'm thinking, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? But like I said, the older I get, the smarter he becomes, because when the mule would have died, when the tractor would have broke down and rusted all to pieces, the older I get, the more I appreciate a cool breeze and a good drink of water.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, those kinds of things seemed like throwaway lines almost at the time, but the longer you sit with them, the more beautiful they become. And so in retrospect, the gift he gave me at puberty is stronger now than it was ever. You know what I mean? It just keeps getting strong. So it's the gift that keeps on giving.
It's a kind of a snowball effect. Gets bigger
Yeah.
with
And so every ritual that we do is kind of like that. It alters your DNA. I mean, it changes your direction. It changes, ethics and morals and value-based decision-making skills are more critical today than any time in history, I would say. Because, I mean, there's been cruelty and all kinds of stuff throughout history, but this is the first time that I can imagine when, the earth has destroyed itself by suicide. You know what I mean? It's like we get hit by an asteroid, Jimmy, and all kinds of things can happen. But like, what was his name? Hawkins. Remember him?
Yeah.
He said, it ain't going to be nuclear war. It's not going to be an asteroid. It's going to be man's own stupidity that, erases us this time. So I just do what I can to try to keep that dream alive. And my grandfather, instilled that into me through various ceremonies, whatever the songs. I mean, there was thousands and thousands of songs, but I think he only knew about 300,
Okay.
But that's a lot of songs to carry.
It is. It's a lot like the old Druid tradition in the British Isles, where they have 20 verses a day to memorize for 20 years. He really had his songs memorized.
Yeah. So, I think I really relate to a lot of the African tribes that I've come into contact with, the way they live.
Yeah.
And it brought back a lot of, where people, grew their own food, made their own clothes, there wasn't a lot of money. Nobody had any money,
Right.
that you would barter. I'd give you some peaches, you'd give me some, kale or whatever, some corn, we were always swapping stuff or helping each other.
Yeah.
If somebody knew something, they'd come over and help you do it. Nobody charged anybody for it. We just, it's just kind of like a community of people. This is what I loved: a community of people who all feel like they have their needs met and they all love each other. I mean, that's a sweet community. And there are a lot of them in Africa, a lot of them in South America, a lot of them in this country, but most of them seem to be in the rural areas, like in the reservations in Canada and places like that, Utah,
Yeah. Well, the city's not known for creating caring people.
No. Well, when you got 90% of the people living on 10% of the land, you got a problem waiting to happen all over the place. Because now you got to feed them and you got to come in and clean up after them and you got to take all their garbage out. So the resources needed to continue to feed these hordes of people and to continue to keep them functioning. It's kind of like, taking care of somebody in a hospice. You know what I mean? And somehow or another, they convince us to build our own prison. and then put ourselves in there and then feel like we have freedom, within the prison we've just built, but we can't leave. You know, they'll make sure that we stay in the box. You know what I mean? They got medication, they got psychiatrists, it's like they got
Everything.
everything out there geared to keep us in this box, you know. It's funny.
Well, it's a lot like having to keep a job so you can pay for the car that you use to get to the job.
Exactly. And then you use the fossil fuels from the dinosaurs to operate the car. I mean, it's like, what? What's
So
going on? Whose
what is
idea is
the pointless loop?
I know it just, I mean, it makes one wonder. When my grandfather said, it's the ideologies that people come up with that separate us. You know, all of a sudden you think you're something other than human. You know, you're a Republican or a Democrat or a Christian or a Muslim, but humanity goes to the side. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, I got this ideology, and the more the ideology becomes real for you, the more delusional you become about it, to the point where you go out there and kill somebody in the name of Jesus. It's like, what?
Yeah.
What? So backwards.
Snake bites its tail.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Gurdjieff talked about how things became their opposite given enough time. And unless you tend it. If you don't tend it, it'll become its opposite.
That's right. It's gonna have a life of its own. But that's why, but you know that people will say, there's a lot of people say, first you think of something, and then you want to share that thought. So you try to come up with the poetry. Somebody else might be listening. They try to understand what you're talking about, but they can only understand it based on their experience. So maybe they do and maybe they don't.
Right.
And so this confusion, this measure, well, it's not what you said, Tom, it's how you said it. You know what I mean? And then all of these things start shifting. And so then I'm thinking, if we can just return back to this place where, if I said, okay, I'm going to say something, first, I'm going to make sure that it's true, right? What I'm about to say.
Yeah.
And then the next thing, I'm going to make sure that it's necessary that I say this at this time.
Yeah.
And then the third one is the most important one, is when I do say this necessary piece of information and this truthful piece of information, can I say it in a way that's kind? You know, and if I can't be kind and truthful and necessary, then I should just keep my mouth shut. You know,
Because
and
it's not going to help. It won't help, will it?
No, that's its own. It's just going to cause more confusion, and so, and more rumors and gossip. There was a time when rumors and gossip weren't even in our consciousness. We only talked about what we experienced. We didn't talk about some concept or some conspiracy. We only talked about what we knew. I saw a tree. I couldn't talk to you about that tree unless you saw it too. You know what I mean? And we're both talking about the same tree. Otherwise, sure. I'm trying to give you something and you're trying to imagine it, but they ain't no I mean, I could be talking about an oak tree and you picture a palm. You know what I mean? And we're not even in the same world. And so conversations used to reflect that unity. You know, we can only talk about what we've a conversation amongst 8 people could, and you're going to talk about this table, for instance. All 8 of you would have had to have sit at that table, or else somebody's not going to be in the conversation because they don't know the table. And you can't imagine it. You can't pretend to know it, you know. And that was when everything was just, I mean, the truth was on the table back in those days. And everybody honored it, you know what I mean? There was only the truth. There wasn't like my truth and your truth and all these truths out there running around like little Smurfs, you know. I mean, there was the truth, you know, truth, only truth, and it's God, the truth. So help you God, you know, kind of. But that's not true anymore. No. Well, it is still true, but it's not happening right now.
Yeah, people are playing with language in a very different way now, and it's a tremendous amount of confusion.
Right, the spin is like really big right now. Marketing, you know, the people run all over the place selling sizzle, and they don't even care if they have any bacon.
Yeah, yeah, it's
sizzle
true.
is what's selling. Yeah,
yeah. Where there's smoke, there's just more smoke.
That's right. Exactly. That's what's happening. But so you know, I think you're the same way, and you and I share this, that we do what we can to alter that narrative and to put people back on track of a you know, a virtuous journey, you know, kind of like the hero's journey, you know, where you peaceful warriors, all those kinds of things, you know, where babies feel safe, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
You know, because, you know, think about me and you are both uh, 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 moving through time at similar paces. But once upon a time, we were like 5 years old, 4 years old, 10 years old, 15 years old. And
Yeah.
that young man inside of us never really went anywhere. I mean,
No.
it's still here. So I have this image, and I share this with you, you know, that my little 3-year-old toddler that's inside of me, I don't want to take that little 3-year-old anywhere where it's going to get hurt, where it's going
Right.
to learn bad stuff, where it's going to get a bad habit, you know what I mean, or pick up some wrong, you know, information.
Right.
And so because I access my child so often, I want to make sure that he stays in the woods, that he
Yeah. Where
that he
he's safe.
keeps like working at the trees and, you know, taking care of things. I don't want him to get messed up with that, you know, that ideology,
Mhm.
whatever the ideology is. And but just look at what's really real for us, you know, the 6 inches of topsoil, the rain, the water, the food, the love, the compassion, the children. That's, I want to keep all of my little babies, you know, all the way up to this old man, you know,
Sure.
because that's the truth, you know. And if you vary from that, I mean, it's like playing with fire. You're going to get burned. So you stay away from greed and fear and anger and hatred, and you know what I mean. Just stay away from them and stay in that other place where compassion and love and mercy and forgiveness and respect live. You know, and then you're out of range of all that stuff. You know, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me something, since this is an interview, Tom, tell me something about what happened to make you start Earth Keepers.
Well, the realization that at some point around 1975 or 76, in that neighborhood,
Yeah.
um, it's not like I'm got any information that's new, you know. I mean, a lot of people know what's going on, but at some point I felt like it was not right for me to be on a soapbox, you know, complaining about something. I thought that if I really had a problem, I should do what I can to try to fix it. So
Yeah.
that's when I said, well, instead of me running around talking about Monsanto or running around talking about, you know, Union Carbide or all these people that would, you know, Exxon and Shell and Mobil and all these people,
Yeah.
British Petroleum, all these people that are doing things, and the Brown and Williamson Tobacco Company with that big nicotine thing where they're putting more nicotine in the cigarettes than they need, you know, all this kind of corruption going on.
Hmm.
I said, what I ought to do is what I can, you know. It's like it was like signing up for the military, you know what I mean? In my own mind, I said, okay, I want to be the kind of a guy that does what he can to try to make the place a better place for the babies, you know, and all babies,
Right.
four-legged, two-legged, baby, whatever. I love little, I mean, the joy and the hopefulness in the eyes of babies, you know. And I don't want them to lose that. And
Right.
so I thought I just need to do what I can. I mean, I can't complain because if I ain't trying to make something happen, then I'm part of the problem too, you know?
Sure.
So
Yeah.
I just kind of thought the best thing I can do is whatever I can do. I do what I can when I can with what I got, you know, and to try to make the place a better place for so it had led me to travel, you know. Once upon a time I was just doing it in this one place, but then people say, can you come to Germany and do that? Can you come to Italy and do that? Can you come to Peru and do? I go, yeah, I'm sure there's people there already doing it, but you know, if so now, you know, 25, 30 years later, it's just grown, and I've just, you know, I've just all over the place talking about this and other people. And I have um, some stories of people coming back to me with feedback, you know, saying, you know, Tom, I remember something you said 35 years ago, you know, and it just made sense to me. You know what I mean? So I could actually say, you know, hear me now or hear me later, but you will hear this at some point if you keep kicking, you know. And so
Sometimes.
it was just an idea, you know, like coach, put me in the game. You know, I wanted to get off the bench, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
see what I could do. And I don't know. I mean, astrologers tell me it's because I've got Jupiter on the ascendant. I
Mhm.
think it's because I was raised in the woods. I mean, who knows? But you know, it could be just DNA, you know, genetics from my family that have always tried to do good things for people. I
Yeah.
mean, the story they tell me. And
Mhm.
and so those stories live inside of me too. So I can't really, you know, say the specific thing other than it was just an accumulation of visuals and audio portions that I put together that made the most sense to me if I wanted to have a story and leave a legacy, as you know, because I have always thought, you know, we got to die to get out of here,
Yeah,
right?
of course.
And
Sure.
so then I'm thinking, then we're all basically in ground school to be ancestors. You know, we're going to walk on this earth for a little while, but we're going to be ancestors for the rest of time. And
Yeah.
so I'm kind of like, I'm the ancestor and you're the ancestor of the future. And then
Yeah.
so there's this, you know, the story of Alan or the story of Tom. And
Yeah.
so, well, I'd like it to be a story that says that he did all he could to make the world a better place for babies. I like that story.
Yeah.
I don't like the story. Well, Tom, he didn't do nothing. He just hung out, you know what I mean? And he did drive a BMW. You know what I mean? He drove a Mercedes. Nobody's going to care. He lived in a $1 million
No,
house. Nobody's going to care. But
no
if
one's
they
gonna
he
get
saved
in your
3 kids his life, you know what I mean? He took care of all these dogs. He took care of the forest. That matters. And so I made that decision at some point.
Yeah, that's the legacy.
Yeah.
So, if people want to contact you, can they still contact you through earthkeepers.net?
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
So that's that website's up.
Yep. Yeah,
And
we took it down for a while, was working on it, but it's back up. We're still adding things to it all the time, but it's up and running right now.
okay.
Earthkeepers.net.
All right. What's your, I don't know when this interview is going to go up, but just in case it does go up in time, when's your trip to Germany?
This trip is, I'm going to be leaving here on the 17th, this coming Monday.
Okay, that's April
Yeah.
17, and you'll be
Yeah.
there for a week.
I'll be there until the 25th.
Okay.
And I'm
And
going to be in a town called Bielefeld for 3
okay.
days. And then I'm going to be in Bad Sulza in Thuringia for 4 days. And
Mhm.
then I'll be in Leipzig and Erfurt that last day. And then back to Frankfurt.
All right.
Yeah. And then I go back in September. I'm already booked over there in September in Germany too. And then Switzerland in a place called Lugano.
Oh, I know Lugano. Sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll have to let Steph know that you're coming in over there. He might rendezvous with you.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Pretty
Good.
place. Yeah.
Absolutely pretty. Yeah. All
One
right.
of the things that I love about Europe, you know, is everybody's living on the places they lived for the past several thousand years, you know, so they're rooted in that place, you know. Nobody that I met feels like they've had to relocate. You know what I mean? They just changed the name. You
It's true.
stay where
Yeah.
you are.
It's true. There are people who've lived in the towns their great grandfathers have lived in.
Oh yeah.
That they don't suffer from that. I got to get away from my parents' American
No.
philosophy.
No, yeah. And this villas I stayed at in Tuscany, this one fella, he had pictures of his relatives all the way back to where they just could be paintings because there was no cameras. I
Right.
mean, he had all of them out. And he still lives in the same house his great-great-grandfather lived in. His uncles and aunts all live around him. His brothers and sisters all live, and they all happy. They all eat together. You know what I mean? And it's a
Yeah.
vineyard, you know, so they all work the vineyard, and
Still
it's a
community.
family thing. Yeah.
Yeah,
They couldn't imagine, you know, the old people going off somewhere else because they love the stories, you know, the kids love the stories, you know.
Yeah, of course. That's a human being is a history book in themselves.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Well, that's part of what this interview is about, and that's kind of where the Wisdom Archive's oriented. It assumes wisdom's passed down through people's stories.
That's right. Oral tradition is strong.
Yeah, it's important and more, and it's that there's a British joke about propaganda. It's just looking real carefully at something. It's a propaganda.
Yeah.
But I think we need to look at the stories real carefully that we're getting and find the good ones.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Because certainly the media has given us all sorts of stories that don't profit us and take us neither here nor there.
That's right. It's just ideologies.
Yeah.
Trying to divide. It's almost as if the intention right now is to divide and conquer.
And the whole thing takes place within the mind.
Right. It's all coyote. That's right. A bunch of coyotes.
All right. Well, we'll have to keep him in his place. I think that probably hits our hour, Tom.
Well, it's been great. I really appreciate it, and thank you much for this opportunity.
Yeah.
It's always good talking with you.
Well, thank you. It's good just to make contact, and we'll do it again at some point. I'll get this down and see how fast I can get it up and post a copy to you, and we'll go from there. And if I don't see you sooner, I'll see you later, and maybe even in Switzerland.
Good. I look forward to it.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you. Peace.